Hello, and welcome to CertNexus's 3 key IoT business strategy steps to follow. My name is Megan Smith Branch, and I am the COO and Product Engagement Officer with CertNexus. If you haven't heard of us before, CertNexus provides certifications within technology that is emerging. We do this to the highest standards possible. We have certifications that are ANSI accredited, and we are developing areas within artificial intelligence and currently have a portfolio within IoT and cybersecurity. But today is all about IoT. And what are some business strategy steps that you can follow to be successful with your IoT implementations? But let's back up a little bit. The reason why we're here has to do with those exorbitant numbers that you see at the top of this screen. Those numbers are incomprehensible and are staggering. If we put a number like 20 billion in context and try and wrap our heads around it, if we lived for 20 billion minutes, we would live until we were 38,052 years old. 520 billion would be nearly 990,000 years. But the numbers that we're talking about are because of some statistics that we have seen and are starting to get used to. Gartner Insights that came out a few years ago said we expect to see 20 billion internet-connected things by the year 2020. That year is coming up quickly. When it came out, it seemed improbable. It seemed impossible, a long ways away. But now when we look at it from a business perspective, Bain & Company just came out with some statistics saying that they expect IoT to grow to double from what it was nearly 3 years ago by the year 2021. $520 billion. That leaves a lot of opportunity on the table. So why is this becoming so prevalent now? To do that, let's take a look and step back with a little bit of the history of IoT. I love these images on the right-hand side of the screen. The top image is of one of the original computers. Now that computer took up 1,800 square feet of warehouse space. It weighed more than 25 tons, and for that, it could execute 5,000 instructions per second. Not too shabby in its day. But take a look at the image below. That's the iPhone 6, even outdated as we speak. But that comes weighing in at a whopping 4.55 ounces and gives us 25 billion instructions per second. Amazing. From the top to the bottom, all within just a generation or two. Now, the items that you see on the left-hand side of the screen are the reasons why IoT is happening and exploding now. It really is the perfect storm of all these technologies coming together at a time when it makes sense. We're seeing miniaturization. That's evident just by the images on the right-hand side of the screen. Connectivity, things like 5G, wireless, cellular, Bluetooth. That allows connections in even remote areas. The power sources that we're talking about, the ability to operate on very small amounts of electrical energy, rechargeable batteries, the ability to harvest energy from the surrounding environment, that enables devices to function in mobile applications and in those remote locations that we were talking about. And also just the cost. These processors, sensors, and actuators are relatively inexpensive components that enable this expansion of those small, capable devices that allow us to measure the local environment, process data, and respond accordingly. Now, when I talk about IoT, oftentimes I hear, well, we've got IoT because we understand cloud. Cloud is one of the components and one of the technologies that has created this perfect storm for us. That ability to delegate data collection and analysis tasks to more powerful computers in the cloud are enabling those IoT devices to stay compact and operate on minimal power. And then finally, It's just the accessibility, that ubiquitous computing, that we're just an arm's length away from our devices, our smart watches, our smartphones. We even walk up to a refrigerator, and that is allowing computing within an arm's length. And they run these applications to control and pull information from the remote devices and services. So that's a little bit of background of how we got here and why those numbers are so staggering. But let's talk about the business implications and the decisions to implement IoT and how you want to be a success story. You want to be a part of the 26%. What do I mean by that? This refers to the Cisco's research that came out about connected futures. Those IoT value, the challenges, the breakthroughs, and some of the best practices. That study indicated, when surveyed, that the data said only 26% of those IoT implementations were considered a success, which means 74% of opportunity left on the table. Now, why is that? Why did they find that IoT initiatives are failing? Well, for the project managers that are listening, it's all about the time. It took too long. As soon as you run over on time, then you're over on budget. They were recognizing that there's limited expertise out in the field. There just isn't enough knowledge about the entire IoT ecosystem. Well, we have expertise in certain areas. Overall, the enterprise has that limited expertise. Also, the quality of data was subpar. We're going to address that a lot today. And the lack of integration across teams. So the three key strategies that we're going to look at is, number one, define your business strategy for IoT. And we're going to give you some tools to do that. Number two, establish your team, internally and externally. And finally, mitigate risk to maintain a successful implementation and project. So let's dive right into that number one, defining your business strategy for IoT. So before you dive into this, there's three focus areas that we want you to consider. And there's a specific order that we recommend you take a look at them. First of all, define your value. What new or incremental value does your idea provide to your customers? This is the key to first understand what that value is, and a critical first step. Oftentimes, what we see in IoT implementations that have failed is that this is defined afterwards. Second, once you've clearly identified what value you're trying to add to your product or services, then you can start to work on understanding what existing or new insights you need in order to support that new value. And finally, data. So you know what your value is, you know what insights you need, then you need to look to solutions like IoT to see what data you need to support these new insights required to gain this new value. It's not until step number 3 that you decide that IoT could potentially be an option. So let's break this down a little bit further using a fun scenario. We're going to talk about smart cities. Smart cities is one of those exploding areas within IoT. But smart cities isn't just an IoT solution. It is a combination and a conglomeration of lots of little solutions that leverage IoT. Specifically, we're going to look at garbage. It relates to all of us. We all have it, and we're all challenged by it. We're going to look at this from a municipal standpoint, but you can apply this scenario to any IoT solution regardless of industry, whether you're in healthcare, whether you're in industrial IoT or agriculture, transportation. We're going to loosely base this on a Denmark case study that was done in 2017 and a Pittsburgh initiative that actually implemented this technology. And we're going to start with a clear objective. How do we employ sensor technology on public trash cans? What's our first mistake? We already went to step 3. So let's back up and let's start to define our value. What is the new or incremental value that these cities were looking to provide to their customers? Now, that first one is oftentimes the number one driver that people start to implement IoT. They want to reduce operational costs, and they want to leverage those natural resources. Oftentimes, they're looking to improve competitive position. Now, the third bullet, that is what I like to call the mother lode. When you get to the idea of identifying the possibilities for new and enhanced revenue streams and markets, but keep in mind, that is very difficult to do right out of the gate. That is why so many of these implementations are failing, because they're going for the pie in the sky right out of the gate when they're not looking at what are some incremental value, that add-on of something that you're already doing well. Another great reason or value that you can bring is predictive capabilities. The ability for predictive maintenance, planning. When we talk about the trash cans, we can talk about things like routing. The ability to determine what and when to reduce those costs. See, we just tied in 2 value statements. And then finally, sometimes it's about reducing that impact on the environment. Our natural resources are so valuable that how can we reduce that impact? And that also can provide us some customer loyalty. So let's define the value. And for today's purposes, let's focus on one key area, that number one thing that people are going for to reduce operational costs. All right, we've defined our value. We want to reduce the operational costs for trash collection within a municipality. So what information do we need to drive down these resource costs? So we're going to look at data collection and data processing that we need to make available and who we need to leverage it for to reduce those costs. So one way to attack this problem would be to see if we can automate things. You know, what are we doing operationally that we can now automate? What information will we need to fully automate our trash collection? And what type of information can we give to our operator? Remember, the goal for this exercise is to add incremental value by reducing operating costs. So some of the things that we can do is look at what information do we need. Specifically, we're going to focus in on where these trash bins are, what type of volume is in that trash, and the days between the collection sites. Now, I'm not a trash expert, nor am I a municipality member or leader. However, that's the data that we need to support the insights and offer the value. So we have the opportunity to collect a lot of data, but if we go back to some of the reasons why things failed, it is that idea of the subpar data. Now, can you collect more? Absolutely. But you really want to focus in on what is the data that meets those, supports those insights and offers some value. This 3-step strategic analysis can be applied across any industry and any IoT solution. Now, the question is this data that can be collected by an IoT solution? Is there something that can tell us the location of the trash bins? Is there something that can tell us the volume of trash in the bin? Is there something that can calculate the days between collection? Take that data and give it to the people who need to make the decisions. If our goal is to reduce the number of trash collectors we have so that we can leverage them for other resources within our municipality, if it is to reduce the amount of odor that the trash cans are collecting, maybe we need to think about, what about temperature? Temperature is a great indicator of trash and its odor. And the days between collection, right? So often, one of the Pittsburgh Initiative comments was the trash collectors oftentimes, or the trash itself, is an indicator of what is going on in that neighborhood. Do you need to tie into your security, your safety, your police force? Is the type of trash food waste, or is it discarded needles from drug usage? So understanding what the value is starts to help define what the data is you need to collect. Are you going to be able to leverage and instigate value? Keep your value statements as clear and concise and build upon those. The data will always be there. All right, let's move on to the second strategy, which is establishing your team. So not having expertise within the IoT field, you want to do an evaluation. Once you understand what the solution is that you're looking for, then you need to understand who can do what within your organization. So level set that team knowledge. You have somebody that has cloud expertise. You have a wonderful data analyst. However, you really don't have any engineering that can work with the sensors and understand what actuators and really do that implementation. So maybe it's going out to a vendor that has expertise, that has done this before, and understanding what that's going to mean in terms of time and budget. Or can you educate and validate skills within your own team? So at CertNexus, we offer 3 certifications and training programs that build your team. The IoT Pro helps you define who you need and what you need within a project, beyond just the business considerations that we're talking about today. CIOTP helps to educate your team who are going to be implementing it, your IT project managers, your engineers, and provides a foundational knowledge for IoT implementation across the ecosystem. And then finally, you want to secure it. So what is the security? Because when we're talking about data and we're talking about collection, oftentimes there's a risk of a security breach, which can be costly and put an implementation or a project, stop it in its tracks. And then finally, we want you to mitigate risks. First of all, don't reinvent the wheel. There's wonderful resources out there. There are reference architectures that can serve as a general model for your own projects. The Internet of Things architecture, the IEEE standards, the Industrial Internet reference, Bain & Company, the paper that I referenced earlier has some great guidelines. And then leverage vendor-specific guides as well. When you start to understand what tools you're going to be using, leverage those vendors and the services that live behind them to help with your implementation. Secondly, know the legislation. Data is a hot topic legislatively across the globe right now. Most recently, the Internet of Things CyberSecurity Improvement Act of 2019 was initiated, and this has tasked our National Institute of Standards and Technology with establishing those standards regarding securing the development of IoT devices. Also speaks to identity management standards and patching standards for IoT devices, the configuration of management of those connected devices as well. And it's also tasked with actually defining what an IoT device is. Being aware of the legislation is going to get you ahead of the curve to build a device and to implement a solution that is secure and compliant and can allow yourself access to government contracts. And then finally, incorporate cybersecurity policies within IoT. We talked about designing it, we talked about building it, And then securing it is incredibly important. Because if we look at some of the studies that have come out, we have heard over and over again the cost of security breaches, $2.2 million for incidents with fewer than 10,000 compromised records. 10,000. Think about the data points that IoT devices that bring in. If there are more than 50,000 compromised records, that can jump up to 6.9 million. So by creating policies for the devices, incorporating those cybersecurity practices within the IoT infrastructure, and once again, leveraging the existing frameworks that are out there, like the OWASP framework, and educating your team, building up your team to understand what the security measures are that can be taken within cybersecurity. So that's it. Easy as pie, right? The important thing to remember is to build your path for your organization. Start by assessing. Build a leadership team that knows what to assess, and if the solutions are even reasonable and appropriate for IoT. Use a micro-credential like IoT Pro to help build that team so they can understand a design and then leverage the skills that you have. Provide training and resources to build your internal team where you can. The certified IoT practitioner allows you to build that team. And you can validate along the way with credentials, with certifications, and then of course, you can build that path. If you're bringing security in-house, have a holistic overview of security and within your IoT infrastructure. Then you can begin to specialize. Oftentimes what we see is we see organizations going right to the specialty area without level setting and building a strong foundation. Build your path. Remember those 3 key IoT business strategy steps to follow. And good luck with all of your IoT adventures. You can contact us at info@certnexus.com, and we look forward to hearing more about your successes.